National Elective Conference, following the conclusions of the nomination processes at the PGCs, ANC leaders who deciding which ANC leaders will lead the party beyond the elective conference, and some outstanding disputes going into the conference. We're now joined by political analyst Thapelo Tselapedi. Thank you very much indeed, and you're with the University of Pretoria. So we've had the PGCs, and you know, if you just look at the provincial numbers, it says Cyril Ramaphosa 5 versus Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma 4, but that really doesn't tell the story at all, does it?
No, it's not a fuller story, and it's not even a detailed story for that matter. I think what's obviously also coming out is that you know an indication of the branches does not necessarily indicate the number of delegates that will be going to conference. We now know that the number of branches will have more than one delegate. Ethekwini, in fact, Ward 1 will have seven delegates there. So this is just, with the PGCs, this is just to make sure that there is correlation for the national conference for it to achieve its 70%. So I think the best thing is for us not to look at these PGCs as an indication, but rather to see what would be the actual boots on the ground be saying.
All right, so the race proper has really been, has evolved in recent weeks. And I'm just wondering, what is the state of the race after these VCMs, after these PGCs? Where would you say we are in the race now? Have the horses now become clearer? Because there were so many people at the beginning, and it looks like some have started to fall away.
Look, it does look like the picture is starting to form, certainly. But like I said, the issue is going to be the number of delegates inside conference. There's also the two issues, the issues of Mpumalanga and the unity candidacy of sorts. But then there's also the issues of the PECs of the ANC in the different provinces, and the number of delegates each leagues have as well going to that conference. And you also see that the margin is not so big. I mean, some estimates are that the difference between the Nkosazana and Cyril are between 300 and 500 delegates in terms of nominations. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to be a big difference, given that that number excludes obviously the league's voting delegation and obviously the PECs of the ANC. So while we still have a slightly formed picture, I mean, compared to 2 weeks ago, but I mean, we're still not that close. I mean, conference is obviously next week, effectively. So I think we'll have a better picture once you get in there, and certainly once we see the first day and they deal with the issue of credentials as well.
So a lot of people observing these politics at the moment will say they can't remember a time there's been so much legal action, the ANC suing itself, contesting decisions, meetings, BCMs. Has it ever been like this before? And if not, why now?
Look, perhaps it's for that sort of question, we need to look at post-1994 and how the ANC honestly was starting to look at organizational renewal. For a long time, I think the ANC did not look at issues of organizational development. And I think post-1994, when they were looking at UDF and SWAICO with the youth movement, for the first time then brought about branches in the regions and the provinces and so forth, in a sense stabilizing the ANC as a political party, moving away in a sense from a liberation movement. So I think the ANC is struggling with a lot of these issues now, and I think part of the reason why this has kind of come into the sort of crisis of contradictions that it has is that partly an election to political office has in a sense also guaranteed election to government. So a person who's running for provincial chairperson of the ANC is in a sense also guaranteed to either be an MEC of the province or to be a premier of the province as well. So I think all of those issues have in a sense come into contradiction.
Careerist tag that we hear is playing out.
In one sense, certainly, because obviously these things are interlocking. You would have, you'd be wondering what's a ordinary councillor worried about whether it's going to be in Nkosazana or
so a lot of these leaders have been saying some interesting things. We've heard Baleka Mbete just now and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma saying this elective conference is going to be peaceful. We are going to show the people that the ANC is going to come together. Gwede Mantashe is saying that the press likes to call it division. We call it contestation. But there does seem to be a concern that things might not go as planned. They're talking up this peace. Is there a genuine fear that it could go horribly wrong?
I think so. I think, in fact, those statements are indicative of that fear. And there's obviously a need to rein in on sort of elements that may want to disrupt the elective conference. And I think a number of them have obviously spoken with regards to making sure that there isn't a lot of bribery as well going to that conference. So I do gather that there must be legitimate fear over the disruption of that conference and making sure that there isn't any violence, as we saw in the Eastern Cape.
So you talked about the delegates. I mean, the numbers still to be fixed, the allocations still to be fixed, but you may win a province, you may win all these nominations, but actually in the end, it's what that delegate does when he gets into the ballot box. Yeah. And sometimes there's a disconnect from what was discussed at the province to what actually happens at conference. Why is there this disconnect? It should be straightforward.
Look, remember also at National Conference there's going to be a secret ballot. Or let's just even go a bit back. At the Provincial General Conference, obviously, these are branches speaking, not necessarily delegates. So you're just pronouncing what has been the mandate of each PGMs. So at National Conference, it's going to be a secret ballot. People are not going to be watching you. And obviously also the outcome, it's not going to be a situation where that KZN voted in this manner in Eastern Cape and so on and so forth. It's going to be a consensus saying this has been the outcome of the votes. So anything can happen in between that period between PGCs and the actual voting at the elective conference.
Can the spectre of bribery play out in this conference?
Look, we can't rule it out. In fact, it's most likely to be that way. But I think in this, compared to Mangaung, this elective conference, it's a bit harder to be able to bribe people, I think. I think there's been a groundswell of opinion over what's right and what's wrong. There's been a lot of quite clear moral issues and ethical issues. So I think people are looking to straighten those lines going to this elective conference.
Have the branches been clear about who they're voting for and why? Or is it literally just KZN must go to Nkosazana, it's her home province. Limpopo must go to Cyril, it's his home province. Have people actively engaged, do you believe, and chosen carefully who they believe should lead their party?
Look, I think the perception of the issue of Nkosazana being the radical economic transformation candidate and then Cyril Ramaphosa being almost this New Deal candidate is really taking hold, at least in terms of perception of ANC members, I suspect. And obviously then those who are, this New Deal seem to be people who are going to, I think, take back some of the gains of the ANC in terms of its radical economic transformation. For instance, I think the question would be, is Cyril going to deliver on the issue of the state bank? Is Cyril going to deliver on some of these promises that Mangaung took as well? And those things are quite important, obviously. But at the end of the day, the ANC is one. The ANC has a strategy and tactics and economic transformation document. And I think both those candidates are going to push for that.
We've run out of time, but very quickly, the Mabuza factor. What is going on? What is this unity story? Is he hedging his bets? What is he playing a game? What's happening?
That's an interesting one because there was a video clip of him effectively saying, I am the unity candidate. But it's quite clear that this has obviously angered as well KZN. I think KZN has made sure that on that side they keep up to the agreement, and clearly Mpumalanga hasn't. But I think he's also hedging his bets to see who's going to be the winning horse come elective conference. And we're going to see if that strategy works out or not.
All right. Thapelo, thank you very much indeed for joining us and giving us interesting insights as we count down. Yeah. I'm sure views will change every 24 hours going forward. Thanks so much for your time.
All right.
Francis?